So, an honest confession, I used to play a lot of Songhai. At some point, my deck sort of rotated out of the meta a little bit. I played Backstab, Kalios mostly. Reva outclassed him in every sense after a little while. And I haven't really come back. And these cards haven't made me want to come back. They're reasonably strong, but honestly, between the Songhai winter of the recent meta before Lantern Fox and Mana Vortex got a knock, that was off-putting in itself, which is a shame, because Songhai were for a while my very favourite faction. Now, looking at these cards, there's nothing here that really wanted to make me jump back in, and I have been known to replace some of the Songhai quests I get, which makes me a bit sad. But let's start from the start. So, I think this card's actually pretty cool, Obscuring Blow, but, you know, it's a reasonably powerful effect. It combos with Killing Edge. It's a very Songhai card, you know, it does a little bit that's actually a lot. Deal those 2 extra damage, prevent your minion getting hit back, combo with Killing Edge for even more damage, blah blah blah. And it's nice that you can use Killing Edge on random other minions. The problem is that you're still putting this in your deck, taking the place of something else that you need, drawing it in your hand, and then using up a card to play it on a minion. You know, if it gave Backstab 1 or Backstab 0 and drew a card, I'd much prefer it. I don't know if that would be, I don't think that would be a healthy design. Not at all, actually, that would be nuts. Maybe if it was expensive, but whatever. Like, we don't want more Mana Vortex or more Songhai Winter, but the problem is that, looking at this card, from my perspective, I don't really want to take something out of my deck, and then also out of my hand, just to get this, you know, situational effect. I'd rather just play my Backstab minions that already have Backstab, because I'm already looking for, you know, Inner Focus, Mana, Mist Dragon Seal, Killing Edge, all this other, you know, this other stuff to get a decent attack in with them. So having to find this as well, in addition to random minion X, seems counterproductive. In addition to that, you can often in a Songhai deck play only minions that either have Backstab or don't need this card. Like, you can play a ranged minion, Key Beholder, an enormous minion in Hamon Bladeseeker, Onyx Jaguar, which doesn't really need to get into combat, Zendo, likewise. His body's big enough as it is. Like, there's no real need for this card in a Backstab deck, because you can already play, like I said, Backstab minions and then good support that go well with the other cards in the deck. Key Beholder is really good with Killing Edge, Hamon Bladeseeker is really good with Mist Dragon Seal, etc. Plus, it adds more vulnerability to Dispel and more vulnerability to bad draws to a deck that's already weak to both of those things. Especially since Mist Dragon Seal got nerfed. Deservedly nerfed, I think, but nerfed. So, this card looks exciting, and I wish it was good, because I would love to do stupid things with it. It fits right into that Songhai thing of, like, play my minion, give my minion haste, play this card on it, play this other card on it, play this other card on it. Now you take 12 and I've got a massive thing. Haha! And your opponent's like, damn, I just took 12 and he's got a massive thing. No! But this, it just doesn't do that. There are too many other cards that are like, pay an entire card slot from your hand and deck. Give a minor buff. We've got Mist Dragon Seal, we've got Inner Focus, we've got Saberspine Seal. We don't need more. So I much prefer this card to Saberspine Seal as a design, especially as it can affect your general. I only just noticed that, actually. I wonder if that makes it better. But, you know, I don't play Saberspine anymore. When I did, I played it, when it was 1 mana, I played it as a one-off to help deal with Silver Guard Knights. Because if you go turn 1, I play a dude, and they go turn 1, I play a Silver Guard Knight, you can move up Saberspine, kill the knight, and still have mana for plays. But Obscuring Blow doesn't do that. And therefore I think it might be doomed to remain in obscurity. Hey! Ethereal Blades. To be honest, this has all the same problems, except that it's not as cool. It's quite a... I think it's actually a reasonably strong effect. Like, it makes your general remove something, and then gives you a little bit of value in the form of a permanent buff to a unit. Oh, sorry, it's not a permanent buff. In the form of a unit being able to trade up. Oh, actually, wow, if it's not a permanent, that's quite bad. Like 2 mana for +2 attack. I mean, again, Saberspine Seal is not really good anymore. This doesn't help particularly much. And you don't normally like your general getting into combat themselves and taking damage in the process because, you know, you are fragile as a Songhai general. You don't have that much defense. I think... I don't think this card is quite bad, but I think worse than that, it's just unnecessary. It's not... It doesn't really do much. I understand that these designs are very safe. They don't replace the cards that were nerfed. They're not new Mana Vortexes, new Lantern Foxes. So I can completely understand why Counterplay would have wanted to, you know, let Songhai lie low for a bit after everyone hated them for like months. But at the same time, it's a bit of a disappointment to see 2 of the 6 slots, as it were, in the expansion spent on more copies of an effect that Songhai decks don't need more of. We've already got Saberspine Seal. Like, we don't really need more slightly cooler Saberspine Seals. And yeah, these cards are both better than Saberspine Seal, but not by much, you know? I mean, Obscuring Blow is, like, pretty strong, but it still fits into that same space of, like, it's probably quite a good card, but I don't want to put it in my deck. I don't want to waste an entire card on it, on such a minor effect, without getting something back. You know, if Heaven's Eclipse was cheaper, for instance, you know, if Songhai had an equivalent of Trinity Oath where you could motor through your deck really fast, which they are supposed to be able to do in theory, I feel like these cards would be a lot better, these sort of marginal effects. As it is, Heaven's Eclipse is just a little bit too expensive, and things like Lantern Fox is gross, but it doesn't go through your deck, it just makes Phoenix Fires and burns your opponent in the face. So I think if Lantern Fox drew cards, Songhai could be a very different, probably more interesting faction. Like, I think if they made it do that instead of generate Phoenix Fires, it would be a much better, healthier, more fun card. As it is, there are so many games where your opponent Phoenix Fires you in the face 5 times the spell damage up, which is still completely possible. You know, it's not as good anymore, but it can happen. And I don't think Songhai should be a burn deck. I think they've got so much more potential than that. So in order to make cards like this work, I would like to see more in-faction draw that did cool things, that synergize with spells, like make them cheaper, like Zoe does, for instance. It's quite a cool idea. A faction version of Adjudicator that's better could be interesting. You know, a draw spell that, if it draws spells, makes them cheaper. And something like that, you know, just ways to go through your deck and play all these like cheap, crappy spells and then make up for it. Because the problem with Mana Vortex was that it let you play powerful value spells, because the cheap, crappy ones you just didn't run. You ran either the ones that killed your opponent, like Phoenix Fire, or the ones that, things like Killing Edge, that are just very powerful buff spells that also, you know, could cycle. So you played that and you played Heaven's Eclipse, for instance, and Onyx Bear Seal, which is a strong removal spell. So you play the cards that are above a certain power level. And I understand that a lot of the problem with Songhai at the time was that they could go through their deck, you know, they could do a combo and then reload. The problem is that these cards are designed, as it were, or they feel like they're designed, for a faction that can do that, that can tear through its deck and reload. I don't know if they were made before the nerfs. Maybe that would make sense. But as it is, like, Obscuring Blow is like maybe useful. 1 mana is a pretty low cost. Ethereal Blades, I don't really want to spend 2 mana in Songhai for this effect. I don't play Songhai to do that, you know? Yeah. I feel like Songhai are very much balanced on a razor's edge. You know, the sort of faction that they're either broken or they do almost nothing. So I can completely appreciate that it's very hard to make them come together in a way that's fun and challenging and puzzly, like they have been in the past, but also fair. And I think Backstab High is just a little bit underpowered right now, but it would be really cool to see new options for that deck that don't do this, you know, that don't just take cards out of your hand, take slots out of your deck to achieve more minor pump. Twilight Fox, this is more like it. So this is a really cool card that I just haven't had the will to play around with yet. But at some point I do actually intend to do something with this, because I think this is really neat. It's very Songhai. It does say random. I think Songhai are better with precise effects like juxtaposition. It's a really Songhai-ish card. But yeah, teleporting enemies around, setting up backstabs, I think it's sort of, it does it a bit easily. Like, that's a very big disturbance to the opponent's force if you're far away. But although I'm not sure I like the exact way the effect works, you know, that it picks at random and that it can do it from across the battlefield, I do like what it does. I think, you know, Songhai should be all about the interference and the teleporting and the backstabbing, and this card does all of that. And I think that's pretty cool. And I also think that, you know, the Blood Surge is a nice natural limiter on it, because you can't always do it early on. You can't blow out that turn 1, 2, 3 with it. You know, that sort of thing. You can only do it later, reliably. And in the mid game, you can do it sometimes. So the shields are up and down for your opponent, which means they can play around it a bit more and predict when it's coming or when it's not. Now, this card isn't popular enough in the meta for that to be the case, but if it was, that natural sort of checks and balances system caused by the Blood Surge mechanic would, I think, go a long way to making it not as annoying as it is on first glance to play against. Because, of course, you know, being able to hold the board position is a big part of the strategy in Duelyst. If you're getting randomly picked apart by silly Toilet Fox every turn, that's going to be very frustrating. But knowing when it can and can't happen, I think, is a good limitation to an effect as powerful and as kind of trolly as this one. So I would be interested to see how this affected the game if it was regularly played. I have a feeling that it's the sort of card that's supposed to stay janky and a bit uncommon, because if it was played all the time, I think it would ruin more games than it made fun. I think it would be fun for only one player, basically. And even then, when it picked the wrong thing, you'd get pretty annoyed at it. But I think it is the sort of thing that Songhai should be doing. It is the sort of thing that deserves to be in the game in small quantities. And so I think putting it on this card that's just like a bit underpowered with a Blood Surge on it, I think is a very good idea. Whiplash, more straightforward. This seems like a gauntlet print, but it probably is playable in Constructed. Again, I'm not sure I'm a big fan of Songhai as a burn class. I'd like to see more of the tempo-y aspect, because I feel like Songhai should use minions more than they do. I think being able to cast spells at the opponent's face and generate face damage off stuff like Four Winds Magi, I think that's a key part of their kit. But doing nothing but that is such a waste of potential. So although this card is a minion, it's minion based, it can be interacted with, it doesn't have to be anywhere near the opponent to connect with face damage. And I think that's not really what I'd like to see from Songhai. Ironically, I'd like to see more stuff like Obscuring Blow, but good, or in a faction that had the support for it right now. Because that is the sort of effect I want. Imagine if you had like a Primus Fist type minion that had Obscuring Blow's effect on it. You know, it gave Backstab 2 instead of +2 attack for one turn. That sort of card could be really fun. It is a minion, so you can just run it out there. You don't lose a card for it. It doesn't trigger spell synergy, but ignoring that, it's, you know, it provides you with a body, it buffs another minion, lets you make tempo plays, rewards you for positioning, gives you something else to play positioning on afterwards. Whereas a card like Whiplash, I think, you know, it deserves to exist, but I feel like even Blood Surge getting Backstab 2, that, I mean, we've got Gorehorn in that slot already, as it were, but, you know, that would be more what I personally like out of Songhai, and what I think is Songhai's strength. Songhai decks are best when they're casting Juxtaposition and putting a 9/7 behind the enemy and like throwing everything into disarray. When you play against Songhai, they just go Phoenix Fire you, Phoenix Fire you, Phoenix Fire. Like, no one wants that. It's not only boring to play against as the opponent, it's just such a waste of the coolest faction in the game. Like, Songhai combine everything that's cool about blue-red decks in Magic the Gathering with a board. You can teleport stuff around, you can get behind people, you're rewarded for all these clever maneuvers. But right now, that's kind of maybe not good enough. in the meta. And certainly I haven't seen that much success when I've played my Songhai deck. Like, the nerf to Mana Vortex did hurt quite a lot. You know, the amount of tempo and extra cycling you get off that, I didn't realize quite how much the deck relied on it. And I wasn't even playing Lantern Fox for a while, so the deck can function without Fox, like, because of Zenri, when he was 5 mana, it was everywhere, so I just cut my Foxes. I was like, I'm not dealing with this. I lose, you know, if my opponent Zenri's a Fox, I just lose, so I just cut them. But, yeah, losing Mana Vortex hurt a surprising amount for that deck, and I don't think that deck was overpowered. It was the River deck that just played burn spells and these 1/1s that you eventually would run out of ability to deal with, you know, with ranged. Like, I think losing Mana Vortex might have cost the faction maybe more than we realized, just because other much, air quotes, fairer or cooler decks that weren't as overpowered or as oppressive also depended on it to be able to make those efficient tempo plays. So a replacement for that card that fit into a deck like that, but not into a burn you in the face deck, or more cards that interacted with board position and not the face. That's what I'd like to see. So I think Whiplash in itself is a relatively inoffensive card. It's clean design, nice art, you know, can't really complain. It's not that strong, so it's not going to like ruin the meta or anything. It's fine, good in Gauntlet, etc., etc. But I am slightly disappointed by it. I don't think this is what I want to see from this faction. Cobra Strike. So this card also makes me a bit sad because it goes straight into that same deck, the deck that can burn you in the face repeatedly, because it rewards that playstyle while also removing a minion. I think a lot of people were surprised that this card was as crap as it is, as it were. You know, it's 4 mana, it's a lot, it doesn't remove big things, but that's because if this card was cheaper, it would be insanely oppressive. Like, if this card is good, it's too good. You know, between this and Lantern Fox and Phoenix Fire already, that's so many ways to deal 3 damage to your opponent's face. And if you can remove minions at the same time, which is a big part of why pre-nerf Songhai was so good, was that they had, you know, Fox was just really good at interacting with minions that then generated bone spells to hit your opponent with. So if Cobra Strike was any good, it would be nuts. So I quite appreciate that this card is only 4 mana. I think that's fine. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. But it's... I don't know why it exists necessarily. I think a card like this, it's printed deliberately safely. It's an epic, so it's probably not intended for Gauntlet. Maybe it's meant to be for like a more tempo-y Songhai deck, but you know, for that I'd like to see something like, you know, deal 3 damage to any enemy minion, teleport a minion of yours 2 spaces for like 2 or 3 mana. I think that would be much more interesting, and again, plays more into that tricksy, flickery, annoying Songhai deck style. Even something like deal 3 damage to an enemy minion, reactivate a friendly minion for 3-4 mana. Don't know if that would be too powerful, but it would be sweet. You know, it would be cool. I think that would be a healthier and more fun design that pushed Songhai more towards caring about board position and using all their cool positional tricks the way I feel like they were intended to be used. Whereas this card, as it is, you point it at their face and you get to defend yourself in the meantime. So it somewhat disappoints me that Cobra Strike has to be a bit crap, because that's the last thing that Songhai need right now. I mean, we've got Obscuring Blow, we've got Ethereal Blades, these cards that are just a bit too underwhelming, because, you know, if they drew an extra card or if they were really powerful, the Songhai would go back to being broken again. And so we have to have these very safely designed cards. You know, I think knowing when you need to make a safe design, I think that's a valuable skill. You know, knowing, like, having the humility to be like, yeah, we screwed up, let's not break this faction again. Let's treat them with kid gloves for a bit and see where they pan out. That's fine. And these cards can always be buffed, or we can print better cards later. Not an issue. You know, this is obviously not inviolable or anything, but it does sadden me when all the other factions got really cool stuff and Songhai got bugger all, basically. And finally, Geomancer. So this was, I think, the second card spoiled from Rise of the Bloodborn, and it scared me. I did not like where this was going. Again, having just come off the meta where Songhai was like, burn you, burn you, burn you. Here's a minion that lets them do it forever. They never run out of Phoenix Fires. And you can't stop them. You can't do anything about it. Like, the amount of inevitability this gives a burn deck is absurd. Absolutely absurd. As it pans out, the card hasn't seen much tournament play. Much ladder play. Hasn't seen much play. I assume it's awesome in Gauntlet, but I haven't tried it yet. To me, that doesn't matter. The fact that this card is in the game, I mean, the fact that it's not good says even, even strengthens this message. The fact that this card is in the game means that no matter what happens, there's always going to be a baseline length for games. If Geomancer is good, then you can only go so long against the Songhai deck before they just burn you in the face every time, and you can't stop them. Like, I think the only way to beat this card is like Kaleno, which is a card people complain about as being unhealthy, but you need it to be able to beat stuff like this. I don't think Geomancer is a healthy card for the game. If its effect wasn't permanent in some way, that would be fine. If it was dispellable, or if it lasted while the Geomancer was alive and it was a bit tougher, or whatever. That would be fine. If it was like your next use or your next 2 uses of the Bloodborne spell, a Phoenix Fire. Also fine. I mean, even if it just had opening gambit, put a Phoenix Fire in your hand. Also fine. Powerful, but fine. It's just a value card. But one thing I think is important in card games is to have the games not get repetitive. The only real weakness of Duelyst's replace system, which is generally a fantastic mechanic, is that as the game gets a little longer, the same plays come out on the same turns very, very reliably. And obviously that's a good thing for the person playing the deck, but it does mean that, when the Makanto player gets to 6 mana, well, when the Magmar player gets to 6 mana, it's Makanto time, right? That's a fact of life in Duelyst. Like, they always have it, because the chances of them having seen a Makanto by that point in the game, if they're replacing it every turn, is really high. Ditto with Abyssian and Spectral Revenant. The chances of them having seen a Revenant at that point in the game is pretty high, and they at least have the option to hold on to it. So I think that's a weakness of the game in general, and I wouldn't want to remove the replace effect, but it would be nice to have maybe more variety in such cards, like tone them down a bit or print other alternatives, such that the turn isn't always the same thing. I think it's fine to have cards be at that power level. I don't think... although I've struggled with Makanto in the past, I've come to the conclusion I don't think the card is necessarily unhealthy. It's just good, really, really good. But it is possible to play around it. It is possible to beat it, But it does mean that if your hand or your board state doesn't beat a Makanto, you don't have the option of saying maybe they just don't have it, because they do. Of course they do. They probably have a second one as well. The people not having it is a key, important part of card games. I don't think Hearthstone does this very well either. In Hearthstone, your early game is very inconsistent, but in slow matchups, you more or less play as if you both have your entire deck in your hand the whole time, because they're slow enough and the removal lines up in a certain way against the threats enough that the games tend to play out in very similar ways. You use the same card combos, you use the same removal on the same creatures. Magic is much better for this, because the decks are bigger, there's a bit more inconsistency, you don't always have the right lands. Now, mana has you get a lot of non-games in Magic where you can't cast your spells properly, or you draw too many lands and you can't do anything. For those who haven't played it, in Magic you don't get a mana crystal every turn. You have to draw cards from your deck that give you mana, called lands. Excuse me, one. So that adds an inconsistency. And between the fact that some of your draws are essentially blank in the long game because they're land, and the larger number of cards in the deck, it decreases the chances that it'll have a particular answer to your particular card on a particular turn. Going back to Geomancer, Geomancer completely removes any chance of your opponent not having the Phoenix Fire to go to your face. And the next turn, and the next turn, and the next, I fail to see how playing against this card is in any way interesting, given time. There is the challenge of beating something that's hard to beat. I mean, I once held on against a Lilith player who had Variax Bloodborn spell active for like 10 or 15 turns trying to find a Star's Fury. I think I drew it the turn after she played a Shadow Dancer, so I didn't get away with it, but I tried. But if that was every game, it would get really dull. And I'll reiterate that when we get to Variax, but Geomancer, if this card was good, I would hate it. As it is, I'm quite happy that the meta is fast enough and full of enough powerful win conditions that this card doesn't see play. Because I think losing to Geomancer would be probably one of the most boring ways to lose a game of Duelyst. Because you can't even run away. You can't do anything about the Phoenix Fire. You just take 3 damage to the dome every turn. It's a bit like playing against Fae, with the Bloodborn spell, except that it can also hit minions on command. So you can't even try and amass a good board state because a certain percentage of your minions will just die to it. So I think removing all of that, maybe they don't have it and trying to run through all their copies of Phoenix Fire in the deck or whatever, removing all of that interplay, that counterplay as it were, makes, for me, I think Geomancer an unhealthy card to have in the game. I don't like it as a design, and I'm very glad that it currently doesn't see constructed play in any number. And that makes me sad. Again, it's like Cobra Strike, the sort of card where if it was good, I would loathe it. I think those are the sort of cards that you don't want in a game. And maybe my opinion on Geomancer is more extreme than most. I think most people haven't seemed quite so perturbed by it as me. But I think this card isn't the sort of card that you want in a game like this. I think in a game where you have to kind of do everything manually, you have to stick minions and then attack with them. You have to, if you want to protect yourself, you have to put down taunts and run away and gain lots of life and all that stuff. It's already hard enough to defend yourself. The fact that Songhai have a card that provides reach, fair enough. Spiral Technique is a card that I'm okay with existing, by and large. You can play around Spiral Technique. But the key thing with Spiral Technique is it's clunky and expensive, so they probably only have 1 copy in their deck. So they don't always have it. So sometimes you just go to 8 and you say, okay, well, if they have Spiral Technique, they have it, but you don't know. There is that uncertainty, and you can choose to take the risk if you want. And sometimes you'll be rewarded for taking that risk. I think that's more of what the game needs. And Geomancer is kind of the opposite of that.